Hello, history scholars. Mrs. Olson here. We're going to be learning about the branches of government in the next 3 lessons. Our branches of government were established in the Constitution. Isn't that neat? Our forefathers had the idea that over 200 years ago to have different sections of government. We know why, right? We learned that the colonists thought that the King of England had too much power. So, when they drafted the Constitution, they wanted to make sure that no one part of government had too much power. Okay, let's begin with our learning target, which reads that you will be able to understand the organization of U.S. government. Now, be sure to have a piece of paper and writing utensil handy, or you can open another window on your screen to record notes, and you are always encouraged to pause the video when you're recording information. Okay, guys, let's go. All right, our first slide reads U.S. government. So it's always a good idea to try to take notes in the same format. So on your piece of paper, you're going to write the heading U.S. government, and then beneath it, you can record the details that go along with U.S. government, okay? So before we get into the branches of government, I want you to understand that there are different levels of government. And we have to follow all of the rules of the different levels, okay? So here's one level which says federal. Now, the federal government, their headquarters are located in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to show you a map in just a moment after we get through the other 2 levels of government. So the federal government is what we're talking about when we're talking about the branches of government. Now, that's not to say that we don't have other levels of government, one of which is the state government. So we have to follow the rules that the people in Washington, D.C. say that we have to. And then we also have to follow the rules of the state of Washington. So the state of Washington, their headquarters are our state capital. Who knows where our state capital is? Maybe even some of you guys live near it. Olympia is the state capital of Washington. Okay, and the next level of government is local. So each of us live in a different county of Washington, and the headquarters for our local governments are located in the county seat. So some of you guys actually might live in the county seat of your county. So that's kind of a different lesson for another day, but I wanted to share with you that there are 3 levels of government. At the top is the federal government, and then state, and then our local governments. Okay, so if you're writing, go ahead and stop the video right there. I'm going to go to the next page, which is just a map. Okay, so I chose this map to show you. Here is Washington, D.C. So this is where our federal government is located, the headquarters, okay? And then, of course, these are all of our states, minus Alaska and Hawaii, because they're not on this map. And then our next map does show Alaska and Hawaii, so with all 50 states, okay? And this one I chose for us because it shows the state capitals. So here's Olympia, the state capital of Washington. We can do a few others. Here's Oregon, right beneath Washington. The capital is Salem. Maybe some of you guys have even been there before. And then who's ever been to California? I have. Okay, and the capital of California is Sacramento. Okay, so state governments headquarters are located in the capitals. Next slide. Now, this is a map of Washington, and it shows all of the counties of Washington, okay? Now, each county has a county seat, and even though it doesn't have the county seats, each one of these is representing local government, okay? So remember, we have the federal government, we have state government, and we have local government. Now we're going to get into the branches of government, okay? So this says that the federal government is divided into 3 branches again, and those branches are executive, which is what we're going to be talking about in today's lesson. The second branch of government is called legislative, and so that's another lesson in another video. And our third branch of government is called judicial, okay? And that is a third lesson in a third video. Okay, so here we go with information about the executive branch. Does anyone know anything about the executive branch? You might be very familiar with who is at the top of the executive branch. Anybody know? Okay, before we get into that, I wanted to show you this graphic. And of course, this is the continental United States that the artist has put in. Can you see some of the states here? And then, of course, the colors and the details of the American flag. Okay, so this is representing our government. And then the 3 branches, right, with the tree: executive, legislative, and judicial. Okay? All right, so here is the information on the executive branch. Who guessed it? The President of the United States is the leader of the executive branch. President of the United States. Okay, so some information about what the president can do. The president can enforce a law. So the president doesn't write the laws. He makes sure, or she, maybe one day we'll have a she president. The president makes sure that the laws are followed, and the president has the power to enforce the laws, okay? They also have the power to veto laws. That means that when a law is presented to them and they disagree with it, they don't have to sign it. They can veto it. They can say, nope, I don't agree with that. And they don't have to sign it. And that means that there's a different process that has to be followed in order for that law to become a law. So they have veto power. Okay? And then this one says that they serve as commander-in-chief of the armed forces. That means that they are in charge of all of the branches of the U.S. military. Okay? All right, and the last one underneath this page says that they can meet with foreign leaders. So it says they meet with leaders of other countries, so foreign leaders, leaders that are in charge of Germany, Japan, Russia, England, Botswana, right? They can meet with other leaders from other countries, okay? Now, if I'm talking too fast, make sure that you pause it and you write down the information that is important, okay? I'm going to go to the next slide, and we're still talking about the executive branch. And on this one, I wanted to show you the seal of the president. So it says Executive Office of the President of the United States. All right, here goes with the information. Now, we should be asking a question like, how do you become president? Well, one of the answers is that you have to be 35 years or older. You have to be 35. If you're 34, you have to wait to run to be president, okay? You have to have been born in the United States. So anyone that wants to be president, if they're born outside of the United States, they are not allowed to become president, okay? They lived in the United States. They have to have lived in the United States for at least 14 years or more. That's what the plus is for, okay? So let's say that they were born in the United States, and then they moved as a kid, and then they wanted to come back. They have to have at least total 14 years or more of living in the U.S., okay? And our next slide is it almost looks like a placemat, but it is a poster of the presidents of the United States, beginning with George Washington, and then ending, here's our most recent presidents, ending with President Trump, okay? And before that, some of you guys, even though you're only in the 5th grade, you might remember President Barack Obama, okay? And before that was George Bush. His dad just died. You might have seen like footage on the news about the senior George Bush. Okay, so our next slide is about the vice president. So, president and then vice president. What does the vice president do? Well, their job is to advise the president. They're supposed to give them suggestions, be a sounding board for them. Okay? If something happens to the president, then they are the number 2 person in charge, and then they would take over for the president. Okay? And when the Senate, and we'll talk about them in the next lesson, when there is a vote to be decided on in the Senate, and there is a tie. So in the Senate, it is equal as far as yeses or nos. The vice president's vote breaks the tie. So that has a little bit of power. Okay, and now we're going to go to the president's cabinet. So the president's cabinet advises the president on issues, and they also help carry out policies. I'm going to talk more about them in just a moment. But their job is to also help the president make decisions. That's advising the president. And then they are actually in charge of different sections of the government, and then they make sure that policies are carried out. Okay, so there are 15 different departments of the president's cabinet. Examples of those are, oh, that's in just a moment. So if you're in charge of these different departments, you're called a secretary, okay, which actually holds a lot of power. I think sometimes we think that, say, like a secretary in a business or even a school, they don't have power like a president, a principal, or a CEO. But in this case, the president's cabinet, they're called secretary of, and then their department. Here's what I mean. So there is the Defense Department. So the head of the Defense Department is called the Secretary of Defense. Hey, I'm not kidding about this one. There's actually an Education Department, and so they are called the Secretary of Education. I think you get the idea. And I wrote here that these are only 4 examples. Remember, there's a total of 15 different departments of the president's cabinet. Okay, and so here are their seals. So you can see that this one goes in alphabetical order. Agriculture, commerce, there's defense, education. Okay, now pause it if you want to look at it just a little bit longer. And that's actually where we are going to end about the executive branch of the United States government. All right, guys, I hope that helps you understand about one branch of the U.S. government. As always, make sure that you ask questions if you have them. Bye.